Okay, looks like we're all ready to go today. Again, I'm Tom Wilder. I'll be your instructor today for Ergonomics Awareness. Most of you know me, but for those of you who do not know me, I have 7 years experience with the Department of Labor. Prior to that, I worked 28 years in various safety training and quality management positions in the textile, machine assembly, and pharmaceutical industries. Most of those years were in pharmaceutical manufacturing, from which I am now retired. So I may give you some pharmaceutical examples since I spent so many years there. A little bit about me. Now let's go into our logistics. Look around. If you're in an office, you might want to close your door, turn phones off. If you're in the cubicle, use headphones and put up a do not disturb note. And for those of you not familiar with Webinado, the tool we're using today, you'll see the PowerPoint slides on the screen right now. If you're using a mobile device and you can't hear the audio or see the PowerPoint slide, you might want to go to a computer and log in. Well, I'll advance the PowerPoint slides as we go through the class. Bottom left, you'll see an emoji, which I will not be using, but you will be using the chat box, which many of you have already used, and we'll use that for questions and comments. And as before, you must attend at least 80% of the class to receive credit. I'll be checking those times after the course. And we cannot give credit to anyone who is not registered and logged in. So if you have people sitting around you that aren't registered and logged in, they're welcome to listen, but they won't get course credit from us. And if you do receive credit, you'll get a certificate within 3 weeks. If you don't get those, please give us a call. Today's webinar is scheduled for an hour and a half, but regardless of the length, you will receive an hour and a half credit, which you can use for obtaining, maintaining certifications such as mesh certification. So we've got the logistics out of the way. And today, again, we're talking about ergonomics, which does not have its own OSHA standard. So if you're looking in the standard book for ergonomics, you're not going to find it. But even without its own OSHA standard, these issues can be cited by compliance officers using the general duty clause. And with this topic alone, knowledge alone will not prevent injuries and illnesses. The knowledge needs to be put into action. The worst thing an employer can do is train people on ergonomics and not do anything about it. I know years ago I worked for a company, and when they hired an employee to work in an office area, day one they did an ergonomic assessment of their workstation, and by the end of the day they were putting work orders in to add footrest, change the chair, adjust the computer, whatever, to make the person comfortable and also to lower the risk of injuries and illnesses. So again, we'll be talking about ergonomics today. And as we get going here, I want to go ahead and do my instant polls like I always do. So I want to look at your experience level with this topic of ergonomics. So what is your experience level with this topic? You're either beginner, intermediate, or advanced. And like any class, we'll have some of each. I'm still looking for some advanced people out there. Of course, a lot of you are very humble. You may not check advanced. But we have a pretty good split, as you can see, of beginner and intermediate students. We do have a small class today. We had a lot of cancellations, and I don't know why. It may be due to the weather, or who knows. But we'll keep going today. So I'm going to go ahead and stop that poll and close it, and ask the other question I usually ask, which is your professional safety experience. How many years of professional safety experience do you have? And let's go ahead and start that. It's always fun for me to look at this because it seemed like it wasn't that long ago I didn't have any experience, and then a lot of time went by. And while we have really good diversity here, it's almost split even all the way across. Some beginners, people working toward being veterans, your veterans, and then your super veterans. Like I said, we do have a good array of results here. So I'm going to go ahead and stop that poll and close it. Now, as we get started today, of course, you are an employee, most likely. You're an employee of somebody, and you're listening to this webinar. And I'm going to give you a list of high-risk occupations for musculoskeletal disorders. So if you're on the list, I'm going to read to you today, you have a higher risk of injuries and illnesses than the regular other employees that aren't doing what you do. So we got registered nurses, nursing assistants, and psychiatric aides. We got firefighters and prevention workers, laborers and freight stock and material movers, janitors and cleaners, heavy and tractor-trailer truck drivers, refuse and recyclable material collectors, stock clerks and order fillers, maids and housekeeping cleaners, light truck or delivery service drivers, telecommunication line installers and repairers, bus drivers, transit and inner city, production workers, police and sheriff patrol officers, heating, air conditioning, and refrigeration mechanics and installers, plumbers, pipe fitters, and steam fitters, and maintenance and repair workers. So if there were anybody that was on the list that I just read, you really need to be paying attention because you're high risk to begin with because of your occupation. Now, let's go ahead and go to the second slide for our objectives today. Of course, we're going to define ergonomics. We're going to talk about problems, injuries, and losses due to issues, signs and symptoms, ergonomic stressors and techniques to combat them, and how does the North Carolina OSH Division deal with ergonomics. Now here in North Carolina, now most of you are in the state. We do get some out-of-state attendees. Most of you are in North Carolina, and you know that this is a state plan state, and the North Carolina Department of Labor enforces the OSHA regulations as authorized by the federal government, federal OSHA. So when we talk about the Department of Labor, we're essentially talking about state OSHA here with this particular topic. Okay, now defined, you see the definition there. Ergo is work and nomos is law. We're interfacing man, machine, and environment to optimize safety, productivity, and comfort. So in a simple way of saying it, we're fitting the task to the human. So if you're doing a job or a task, we want to fit that to you instead of fit you to the task. Now, years and years ago, employees would go to work and they'd say, well, the workstation is too high, the workstation is too low, and the company might say, well, it's just too bad. But when a lot of studies were done, they found out that if you adjust the equipment to fit the worker, they actually get more production done and have a higher quality of work. So nowadays we do try to fit the task to the worker. Now on this slide, we're looking at workplace issues, problems, and losses. So if you're affected by injury or illness, you're going to have discomfort, pain, maybe have an injury or a long-term illness. And your employer is going to pay for that through workers' compensation costs. You could be restricted or you could become disabled. You may lose work. And if your workplace is not well suited for you ergonomically, you may say, you know what, I don't have to work here and I'm just going to find something else. So you have a greater turnover, which of course would affect morale. And like I said, poor ergonomics also decreases productivity and or quality. Now, when I was in the industry, we had an ergonomics committee, and what we did is we looked at the highest risk of processes and tasks in our facility, and we tried to work to improve those. We pick on one or two processes or tasks a year and try to take them off the top of the list as far as being high risk. So now when we sold that idea of an ergonomics committee to top management, we didn't say we're trying to make everybody more comfortable. What we did say is we're going to analyze this process, and after we do this, we're going to hopefully lower the risk of injuries and illnesses, increased productivity, and increase the quality of the product. Now, you will get their attention when you talk dollars, so you want to speak their language. Now, so essentially ergonomics, you may say, is classic industrial engineering. And if you're with a company and you have injuries and illnesses, you can go to OSHA.gov and go to Safety Pays and find out how much an injury cost you or illness cost your company or employer. In 2015, a carpal tunnel, the surgery and everything going along with the carpal tunnel, the direct cost then was $30,000. Indirect costs were $33,000, and total costs were $63,000 for carpal tunnel. So if you have somebody working at high risk for carpal tunnel, you're going to end up, your company's going to end up, or employer is going to end up paying for that in the long run. Now, carpal tunnel can be caused by the workplace, but there are also a lot of genetic factors for carpal tunnel as well. So let's go to the next slide. And ergonomics affects our entire musculoskeletal system. We know what bones are, our structure, muscles, moves the bone, they move the bones. Tendons connect muscle to bone, and ligaments connect bone to bone. So our injuries a lot of times are related to one or more of these. And also, we talk about cartilage in the body for cushioning and lubrication, fluid-filled sacs, bursa to reduce friction, vertebrae, bones in the spine, and discs that are shock absorbers for the spine. Now this picture that's in the PowerPoint slide there, that's actually a picture of a model that we have here in our office that we take out for training. It's a real 3D model, and we'll pass it around the back of the class, so people can feel it, twist it. Now, when we look at the vertebrae of this spine, the 7 top ones are called the thoracic spine. I'm sorry, the cervical spine, excuse me. The top 7 are the cervical spine. The middle 12 are the thoracic spine, and the bottom 5 are the lumbar spine or the lower back. So we talk about back injuries. It's always good to look at a model like this. And if you have this model of the spine in your hand right now, what part of that spine would be the most flexible? This will give you a chance to type. What part of the spine there is the most flexible? Let me know. What is the most flexible part of the spine? We want to be thinking about that. And let me scroll down. Neck, upper. Actually, those of you that said cervical or upper are correct. So that is the most flexible part of the spine. The middle is the next most flexible, and the lumbar at the bottom is the least flexible. So if you have somebody doing an improper lift and they're bending the lumbar spine vertebrae, there's a good chance, or twisting the lumbar vertebrae, there's a good chance of injury or illness there. So like your neck, the top ones there, they're free, they move a lot more freely than those bottom ones. So now with ergonomics, twisting is not really usually a good thing. So we want to eliminate people twisting when they're doing their job, twisting their bodies. We'll talk a little bit more about that in a few minutes. Now, we also want to think about, and I want to catch up with my chat here, arteries and veins. You want to think about the transportation of blood, delivering oxygen and removing waste. Anything that cuts off the transport of blood is bad, or anything that restricts the nerves, that's where you get your sensation. That's not good either. So your nerves are going to give you your senses, and they're going to give you feedback on pain and discomfort. They tell us which muscles to use, and they coordinate activities. So we don't want to negatively affect anything to do with the transport of blood or impulses across the body. So let's go to the next slide. Because if we don't pay attention to this sort of thing, we're going to do damage to the musculoskeletal system. And it can be right away. It can be an acute trauma, or it could be an illness that develops over time, improper lifting over time, for example. And back strain, like the slide says, and tendon disorders are the most common. Now, let me go ahead and stop for a second, and let's see if we have any issues, comments, or questions. Okay, Lori says she's experiencing lack of sound. Is anybody else having a sound issue? How's your sound doing? Okay. We'll just say Lori, sound issue is on. Issue is on your end. Because I have to type that because she might not be able to hear me at all. And like Lori says, it could be a bandwidth issue. Okay. Okay, Michael says he's not getting the slides. Now, one thing I told you at the beginning of this webinar is there's several of you on mobile devices. You're following the webinar on a phone or a tablet. So that's a software issue. So the only thing I could say there is to use a computer and log in. All right. Now, okay, so how's everybody doing? Are we good to go? If you are, we'll keep going. All right. And I'm sorry people are having some issues, but a lot of those are with the mobile devices. The webinar has several issues with those. But some of you use mobile devices and have no problems, so it's not everybody. Okay, now there are also some other disorders that you see listed here. Your tennis elbow, bursitis, carpal tunnel, trigger finger, thoracic outlet syndrome, muscle strain. Those are all disorders that can develop with poor ergonomics. And the back injuries, we can have sprains to the ligaments, strains to muscles or tendons, your lower back strain or sprain, low back pain, or disc disorders. You can have a herniated disc where the disc bulges or cracks, or you can have degenerative disc disease, which is age-related, where your discs lose thickness over time. Now, let's go ahead and I'll go ahead and ask you a question. Let's say you're walking along in the workplace and you drop an ink pen onto the floor. You drop your ink pen. Happens all the time. Can you hurt your back picking up an ink pen off the floor? Can you hurt your back? Absolutely. And one thing I want to tell you is that you're not just, Samantha says, I've hurt my back just standing the wrong way. Good comment. When you're lifting your pen off the floor, what are you lifting? Are you lifting just the ink pen? Yeah, your body or your upper body. So again, when you pick up a paper clip or an ink pen or anything off the floor, you're lifting your upper body. And if you're twisting or doing anything odd as far as your lift is concerned, you could get hurt. Now, you're not going to lift that ink pen like you're lifting a box properly off the floor. Get down, use your legs, not your back. Most people don't lift like that. Now, what is the safe way to lift an ink pen off the floor? What's the safe way to do it? There are actually more than one safe way. How can you pick it up without hurting yourself? Okay, bend the knees. Okay, you can, like Samantha says, you can pick it up just like you're picking up a box. Squat down. Michael's going to use an engineering controller, and Spencer use a grabber. Jen says use your toes. Now, unless you're going barefooted in the workplace, that's a few more steps, but she's correct. Your toes are available and you can lift it that way without falling over. You could do that. Now, I haven't seen the answer I'm looking for yet. Now, using the grabber is a great answer, but in the workplace, you might not have that lying around. How do you lift it off the floor? And this is something we see in sports. Call your boss. Yeah, that's fine. Double roll tape. We're getting creative. We're thinking outside the box. Double roll tape on the bottom of your shoe. Okay, there's a sport on television that you see on Sunday afternoons a lot where they've got to pick up something out of a hole. What is that? Who picks something up out of a hole? Golf. Exactly. Now think about uh, think about how golfers commonly get the ball out of the hole. Now you can take your club in there and get your club under there and flick it out of the hole. But if you do a golfer's lift, it'd be better if I demonstrated this, but if you got one leg almost like straight down, straight, it's like a seesaw. You got one leg straight out and one arm reaching down. You're keeping your back straight and you're lifting something without hurting your back. So when a golfer takes the ball out of the hole, they're actually practicing good ergonomics. We don't usually see them lifting the ball out of the hole like you're picking up a box where they squat down. Now, that would be really funny looking. They don't usually do that, and they don't usually use their golf club. They use what they call a golfer's lift. So tell employees when you're picking up something off the floor, you tell them to use a golfer's lift. Okay? Yeah, let's keep going. Now you have an employee that's doing something the wrong way. They work at a desk, they're working across a sharp edge with a mouse. They might be an engineer, they may be doing CAD drawings all day long, and their hands are hurting. Their hands are getting numb, they're tingling, they're numb. They may be getting pain. You may have redness, limited range of motion, tightness, fullness, swelling, weakness. Now, if you're experiencing any of this, what should you do as an employee? I'm hurting at work. What does your company or employer tell you to do? What do they tell you to do? Tell your supervisor and report it, right. And then the employer is going to decide what to do, okay? Lots of good answers here. Now, what a lot of employers say is if you don't tell the supervisor, that can become an alleged injury or illness. You tell your nurse if you have one there, occupational nurse. But have you ever heard of employees going to their supervisor and saying, you know what, I hurt my back in the warehouse 2 months ago. That's an alleged injury. Good luck with that. So we don't want any alleged injuries or illnesses. It's got to go on the official record for the employer because the employer wants to head it off. If we're heading toward a severe injury or illness, we can do some things to prevent further injury or illness. All right, so what can we do? Now, we can, now a medical professional like a nurse, doctor, they can recommend anti-inflammatory medication like ibuprofen. But you better be careful if you're a supervisor and you got over-the-counter or prescription medication, well, not prescription, but over-the-counter medication, and you're telling an employee what to do. They could have a drug interaction. They could have all kinds of issues with that. A lot of companies will say, look, if you think you have some inflammation, we have some OTC meds here available that we can provide. We're not telling you to take anything, but they're here for your use if you feel like you need it or you have a doctor or nurse say that you need that. But be careful with telling people that they must take medicine. That can cause a big issue. And if you told somebody, if you're a supervisor and you told your employee to take 4 ibuprofen, they would be telling the employee to take OTC meds at prescription strength. That would be a recordable incident. So be careful with your medications. Rest the body part. Ice, heat, work accommodations. Can we change the job or change the work to lower the chance of injury or illness? Physical therapy. Okay, so Vonda says sounds going in and out, slides are fine. Well, we apologize for that, and that's on your laptop. I'm not quite sure, but at least you're getting some sound. And Sky is having a problem too. Let me check my sound and just made a little bit louder and see if that helps. All right. Okay. Now, and Zong says use Firefox. Now, one thing about it is you have Microsoft Edge Explorer, you got Firefox and Chrome. Sometimes one will have a problem with one thing and another one will have a problem with another thing. Your results will vary depending on which one you use. So you're welcome to use a different one if you want. Now, this is a lead-in slide talking about stressors: personal, force, posture, movement, repetitive and static, and environmental. So this picture there, is that good or bad in ergonomics? The picture, bad. Now, we don't know. You'd have to know the situation. Is this person doing this all day long like that? Or did they just do that for 10 seconds? You know, it's like anything, dose and exposure. So that's one of those it depends situations. One thing for sure, to me, it doesn't look very professional. Most places I've ever worked, they frown on people putting their feet up on their desk. Like I said, it doesn't look very professional. And the picture looks like a habit. Now, let's go ahead and think about this picture. Now, it's a small, on your screen, it's very, very small. Now, you can make that bigger. On your screen, it's very, very small. Now, you can make that bigger. There's some little graphics on your screen where you can make it make the slide bigger. You can try that if you'd like. And if you use that tool that's on your end, you won't be able to chat, but you can make it bigger for a second. And once you make it bigger, you can hit the escape key to go back to your regular screen. Now, let's go ahead and name the things that aren't right with that picture. What's wrong with the picture? What is he doing wrong? Head tilted. Now, why is his head and feet up? Okay, posture. Why is his head tilted? You might not be able to tell. What is he doing? He's on the phone. That's right. So he's got his head cradled against the phone, and like Richard said, you should have, and Lori, headsets much better. So if you have people on the phone a lot, get them a headset. If they're a buyer or a salesperson, uh, give them a headset. Like Spencer says, that is old school. You don't hopefully not see that as much anymore. Now, his feet should not be up. He's not sitting in his chair correctly. And Lori notes that the laptop and standard monitors are at different heights. Now, where should where should the top of the screen, both of them, be? If he's sitting correctly, which he's not, let's say we get him seated in his chair properly. Okay, now it has to be directly in front of his eyes, and Elizabeth says the top of the screen should be at eye level or just below. Now, and if he wears bifocals, you'll have to lower it even a little bit. Now, Elizabeth says it looks like he's too far away from everything. That is correct. About how far should your monitor be? If you're sitting at your monitor right now and you stick your arm out, where should that monitor be? How far? Yeah, right. Uh, your monitor should be about arm's reach from your body when you're typing. So if your monitor is way back too far, bring that monitor closer. So a lot of people say, well, if I have a monitor too close, I'm wasting all that desk space behind it. Well, too bad. You're working on the computer all day. You don't want any eye strain. You want that monitor to be in the right place. So let's go ahead and look at these stressors. Okay. Now, most of these stressors you see here, we can control, again, most of these, not all of them. Now, some of these, like I said, gender, your biological gender you can't control. Um, that could be, I don't want to get into debate on that one, but you're biologically born a particular gender. You can't control your age. You can control whether you smoke or not. So if you're a smoker, you're going to be high risk for a lot of things. You can control your strength. You can become stronger. You can control your flexibility. You can control obesity. In some cases, you can control diabetes. I know there's a genetic factor to that one too. You can control how fit you are. You can control your body size as far as your weight's concerned, but maybe not how tall you are. Obviously, use of alcohol you can control. Recreational activities you can control. How much sleep you get, you can control. Insufficient recovery is like if you're working a body part really hard and that body part doesn't have enough rest time to recover, that's insufficient recovery. Or a prior episode with a body part or some issue that you have. So think about these stressors. A lot of these you can control, and that's why a lot of you work out every day or don't overeat. You do a lot of good things to minimize your risk of injuries and illnesses through those stressors. Now let's talk about force. We don't want you to have to exert too much force. because if you do, it may uh, impact your body. So lifting, how much weight are you lifting? Are you lowering something? Are you pushing, pulling? Contact force is all important. Now, to the right of that bullet, these bullets for force, you'll see two types of grip. The left graphic is what kind of grip. This is for our advanced people. What kind of grip is that left hand doing? What type of grip? See if anybody knows what type of grip that is. Like say you're holding a ball. Those are good answers. Not what I'm looking for. Those are all good answers. Okay, that's called a power grip. Power grip. That's a power grip. Now, if you have employees that use tools, and that hand is going around a handle, we would like to have a power grip because that's the most efficient. The body is able to use itself, exert the most power with a power grip. Now, the one to the right, what is this one called? That one's not a power. That's a pinch grip. There we go, Lori Spencer, pinch grip. Now, we have tools that we take to our training classes where we can measure a person's power grip and a pinch grip, and you can get a lot more power with a power grip. So if somebody's using a tool, if they're having to use a pinch grip and they're using it all day long, that's going to create an issue. It's going to make it very hard for them to do their work. Now, we got a picture down here in the bottom right. What type of grip? Now that handle's very small. What kind of grip is that? Pinch grip, that's right. Not only do you have pinch grip, you've got contact force. Here at the end of the tool, you've got contact force there on the palm of your hand. Now, if I had a worker that used that little tiny screwdriver on an assembly line all day long, all year long, they're going to have issues. Production issues, quality issues probably, and also issues with their hand. It's going to mess their hand up. That would be the wrong tool. So, when we're talking about force, how much does the object weigh? Is there much friction? What about the tool shape and size? Now let's get quickly into postures. When you're doing a job, you want to do things within your neutral zone of your body, working in your neutral zone. You don't want to be awkward. You don't want to be overreaching, twisting, and your posture is affected by what you're doing. What object are you working with? Where is it? Where is it being placed? And the shape of the tool. So if your work is forcing you to be in bad posture, we could be looking at problems down the road. So neutral posture with your body, you're standing with your back straight, sitting up straight, arms to the side, shoulders relaxed, elbows 90 degrees, wrists are straight or in the handshake position, and your head's facing straight forward. Now, when you type on a standard keyboard, are your wrists straight in a handshake position? Typing. Wrist straight, handshake position. No. So if you're using a standard keyboard, your You're taking the natural angle out of your hand to your arm. You're straightening up your hand related to your arm. And you're also having to put your hand in a flat position. Handshake is neutral, flat is not. So that is why a lot of you have different keyboards. And for years, they have changed the angles of the keys. Some keyboards have a hinge in the middle where you can flex the keyboard. And there's some keyboards you can play like an accordion. I don't know if you've ever seen those. They're really weird looking. But you could play those keyboards like an accordion and have your hands in a handshake position. So the more you adjust those keyboards to a body's natural neutral position, the better off you're going to be. I'm not going to say your keyboard is going to cause a problem for you. I'm just saying that that's why you see a lot of different ones out there. They'll have a lot of special ones. So if you're keyboarding all day long, you may have a specialized keyboard. Now, we talked about lifting a while ago. We were talking about lifting a ink pen and a golf ball. You want a proper lift. You got to be careful. You need to know the path of the lift, the weight. What's the standard weight that most companies don't want one person to lift? What's about the standard weight? Now, 20 is a good idea. 50 pounds. Now, if your company limits you to 20, fantastic. Now, there's a NIOSH lifting equation. There are a lot of calculations that have to be performed. But generally speaking, if you have people lifting more than 50 pounds, I would get help. I would have that person get help because you could be setting them up for an injury or an illness. So you're going to make sure you know how much it weighs. Keep it close to your body. Face it. Do not twist. Bend using your knees, not your back. Lift with your legs. So when you look at the workplace, make sure that people aren't trying to lift too much. And when you order materials, when you order cases, boxes of materials, if they come in a super heavy box and you're having one person handling it without engineering controls, you might order a different size box, different weight, because again, we could be setting our employees up for injury otherwise. Now, movement. There are three things that we want to look at with movement: repetitive motion, static postures, and so repetitive motions. If you have something that's too frequent or too repetitive, that can cause an injury or illness, especially if you don't give the body a chance to rest. So what companies do is they'll rotate their employees. So if something's very repetitive, they'll rotate people, so they'll do the repetitive work for 30 minutes maybe or an hour, and then rotate another person in and let the first person do something that's not so repetitive. So you don't want too much repetition without recovery and rest. And we don't want somebody in a static posture too long. If you stood still and can't move your body for a long period of time, that's not good. It affects the blood flow. Or if you sit in a chair too long, that's not good. So have people rotate their tasks, get up and down. So if you work in an office, you're going to be doing maybe some typing and filing, but you want to move around. And every so often, you just stand up because static postures all day long can cause an issue. And the movement is affected by your work pace and what kind of task you do. So just keep moving all day long, and for some people that's hard because you may be essentially stuck at a keyboard all day, but please take some breaks from that. Then we have other stressors from the environment. Is the temperature too hot or too cold? Or do you have vibration? Now, most employees don't have to worry too much about vibration, but if you're in the construction business, if you're using tampers or jackhammers or those sorts of tools, you could have issues with vibration. So with these stressors, if we can engineer the problem out, great. Eliminate the hazard, or have people use tools, power tools. If we can't do that, proceduralize it so that people do it the safe way, or rotate their work. Personal protective equipment for ergonomics. Let's go ahead and ask the question, are back belts and wrist braces PPE? Are those good PPE to prevent injury? Back belts and wrist braces? No. So those are all good answers. Now, wrist braces can be good if they're prescribed by a doctor, physician. But having somebody just put a wrist brace on, my sister is a retired physical therapist. She has her PhD in physical therapy. She will tell you that there are a lot of things you can put on your body that will actually make it weaker. Back belts, when they first came out years ago, a lot of people were wearing them, and they were just trying to lift more weight, or they just felt like they wouldn't get hurt with a back belt on. There have been a lot of studies, especially by NIOSH, to show that back belts are not personal protective equipment. So we do not recommend either one of those unless they are prescribed. And like Samantha has a good comment, discourages building strength in your back because of false safety. Great comment. Now, these stressors, we want to control them. Can we reduce force in the job? Can we minimize the weight? Can we order something in smaller boxes or smaller bags? Or when I push or pull it, can I reduce the friction? So can we improve your posture, reduce reach distances? Can I give you appropriate tool? Can I prevent static postures? Can I add variety to what you do? Avoid repetitive motions and consider job rotation. Now let's go ahead and look at some controls that we see out there in the workplace. So a lot of these may not apply to you. But first of all, when somebody's working, see where the work is being done. The big green box on the left is the best work zone. So if that person's arms are extending above his shoulders, that's not good. They're overreaching up high. That works on their shoulder. But the preferred work zone would be right there in the middle. It's just like a strike in baseball, right down the middle. So if they're working too low or working too high, and that is all day long, all week long, all year long, that person can have issues. And of course, the one on the right, we have a side view, and the best work zone is going to be right here. Now, the thing about it is all the workers are different heights and sizes, so the best work zone for one person might not be the best work zone for somebody else. Now, this is not a manufacturing picture. This person is getting very creative. He's got an exercise bike, and he wants to adjust the seat height on it. So he's improvising. He's taken a chair. He's put that exercise bike on top of the chair, and he wants to adjust that nut to make the seat go up and down. Now, if this was a production operation, obviously you wouldn't have people working on bikes on top of chairs. You're just not going to see that. But If you were having to do that task just like he's doing it, which of those two pictures is lower risk? Lower risk, the right picture or the left? The right picture is lower risk. Now this is closer to the neutral zone. He is bending over, but right here, he's got, we call that a chicken wing. He's got that elbow up. If you're looking at workers, if they're out of the work zone, they're overreaching or have that elbow up chicken wing, what we call chicken wing, that's high risk. So get that work in your neutral zone. Now let's just say we take the same person, we say, hey, go in that storage closet and grab that 50-pound box. And he's in a hurry on the left photo. He's in a hurry. Now, is there a pretty good chance that he's going to hurt his back lifting that 50-pound box on the left? Of course. Now just think about your body being like a crane. He's got those arms fully extended. About how much pressure, if he lifts that box in that left picture, if he lifts it that way, which is going to be hard, how much pressure, about how much pressure is going to be on his back? That's a 50-pound box, arm length lift. About how many pounds are going to be on his back? Pressure. 250 is a good guess. Let's go higher. More than 250. Good answer, though. 500. That's right. No, it's not 5,000. It's 500. 500, 10 times. So again, if you're lifting something that doesn't weigh very much, if you do an arm length lift, it's going to be 10 times the pressure on your back. Now, I do long-term care training for nursing home people and nursing home administrators, and they'll have a worker lift a 100-pound, a petite patient, 100 pounds. Again, if they're trying to lift somebody in a bed, arm's length, that would be half a ton pressure on the worker's back. So in long-term care, there are a lot of people that get hurt because they say, hey, I'm just lifting that petite person, and I'm just doing it one time. I'm just lifting that petite person, and I'm just doing it one time, and I don't want to use a engine lift, and I just want to lift them up real quick. 10 times the pressure on their back. So now the right picture, this is a 50-pound box. You're putting about 50 pounds down force there. So extending that arm out is 10 times. So don't forget that. So it's not just the object weight, it's the distance from the body. Okay. Now, use anti-fatigue mats. Now he's standing on anti-fatigue mat, but what is the problem? What is the problem there? He's bent over. So that height of that table is way too low. So if he works all day like that, he can hurt his back, or his back's going to be sore at the end of the day. So some workplaces, they have powered workstations, just like a desk, where he could hit a button and make that table higher. So the good news is he's standing on an anti-fatigue mat. The bad news is he's working too low. So if that table doesn't go any higher, what's his other option? Table doesn't go any higher. Common sense. Sit down. Get him a chair. It's like years ago, I used to work in a chemistry laboratory, pharmaceutical laboratory, and I'm a really tall guy. The lab tables, the benches in the lab or too low. So I had to use a lab chair a lot because otherwise I was towering over the work and it would cause a back problem for me. Now, let's talk about the mat for a minute. Now, he's standing on a mat. Now, let's say they don't have that mat. What's another good option if your company's not going to buy any or employer's not going to buy any ergonomic mats? Okay, rotation of workers is good. Good answer. But what can I do for that employee if I can't give them a mat? Okay, chair's a good answer. Shoe inserts, that's good answer. So Jen is giving me the answer kind of like what I'm looking for. When you buy shoes, now some of your employees have to wear safety shoes. But if you're buying shoes for your employees, there's some they call ergonomic shoes. It's like wearing a anti-fatigue mat everywhere you go. It's like wearing one. They're very cushiony. So if you stand all day long, that can help you. And if you can't buy a shoe like that, like Jen just said, shoe inserts are a great idea. So if any of you work on hard floors or concrete floors all day, you are going to know it if you're not wearing the right kind of shoes. So think about your shoes too. And if you can't do that, get you some anti-fatigue mats. So we're going to erase that and go to the next slide. Now we talked a little bit about workstations a while ago. The top of the monitor should be just below the eye level. Your monitor should be about arm's length out. You keep everything in line, your body in line, and your lower back supported. And it got 90 degrees at your knee there. If your feet are dangling, get you a footrest. Or if your company can't buy you a footrest, get you a box or something to put your feet on. Because that chair cuts off the circulation in your legs, you're going to know it. And I would be willing to bet you that almost all of you have ever had your legs go to sleep in your life. You may be going to the restroom, sitting there too long, and you stand up. That's not what we want. So keep those feet supported if your legs are dangling. Keep your elbows close. Maintain everything in line, wrist and hands. Room for keyboard and mouse. Make sure you don't have sharp edges. On the desk, you can get a cushion to go along that edge if it's sharp. Keep feet on floor and use footrest if you need to. Now, how's everybody doing? Good. Questions, comments? Are we good? All right. Yeah, this is pretty easy to understand. Now, let's say you work in a manufacturing plant and these panels, these looks like they're prefabricated, some kind of wood panels here in a factory. Now, why would that big heavy panel be easy to lift? What are we looking at here? What in the world is this? Suction, that's right. We call that a suction lift or a vacuum hoist. The vacuum hoist is like a brand name, but you can buy devices where people can lift heavy drums, heavy bags, heavy anything using vacuum. And you could probably lift that whole thing with a couple of fingers or with a hand without hardly any effort. So if there's heavy material handling and you don't have enough people to do those lifts, if you buy those vacuum devices and you're an employer, your employees are going to love you because that stuff is so easy to move around using those type devices. And when I was in pharmaceuticals, in the warehouse, we had people lifting 100-pound bags with those. It has a different attachment on the end for drums and bags, but they lift 100-pound bags because they had to transfer bags from a wood pallet to a plastic pallet, and they had to do it one at a time. So sugar came in. It was actually sugar. Uh, you would have about 2,400 pounds, 24 bags on a pallet. So if a worker moves 24 bags manually, that's just dangerous. It's hard to do, and especially if they do it all day long. So use a suction hoist or a suction lift or a vacuum hoist to do that. Get help. Use a two-person lift. And if you're moving materials, use a cart. Okay, Spencer says, notice the ladder in the background. Okay. Okay, I'm looking at the ladder in the background. It looks like a really tall step ladder in the background. Now it's leaning against the wall. It may be being stored. Now if it's being used that way, that would be improper. It looks like it's not in a good location, but the ladder, for safety person, the ladder does get our attention. Now, this is actually a picture of one of our carts here in the Department of Labor. It's in our building here. And we have publications. We have regulation books that we have to move around, boxes of them that are very heavy. And this little lift table will lift up to 1,750 pounds. So if you're trying to move boxes from one level to other, this thing will lift it up very easily, and it rolls around very easily too. So love those. It's a good piece of equipment. Now, this equipment, like others, if you use it all year long, you want to keep your wheels lubricated. And if you have anything that gets hung up around a little axle on the wheel, if the wheel's not rolling, then that's going to cause a problem for the employee pushing it. Jen says, was the last one called a scissor cart? Yeah, we could call it that. That would be a good generic name on it. I don't know if they're called, when they're sold, I don't know if they're called scissor carts, but that's exactly what it is. It works like a scissors lift. Use power tools. I don't know that any of you have, or maybe some of you have ever drilled with a hand-powered drill, old-timey hand-powered drill. A power drill will be a lot better and use a lot less force. Use tool balancers. This is in a meat plant where they're cutting up animals with a saw. And that saw, that heavy saw here, is suspended by a tool balancer so the worker doesn't have to hold the weight of the saw while he or she is cutting meat. So that's a tool balancer. I used to work at a company that had several of those on an assembly line. Use a power grip rather than a pinch grip. Power grip on the left, pinch grip on the right. Now that little stubby screwdriver, the reason you would use that is that may be the only way you can get into a tiny space with a screwdriver. But if I'm doing something and I have space, I'm not going to use that. I'm going to use a longer tool with a longer handle. And Scott says that was a manual lift table. It was. And if somebody called it a scissors table, that would be fine with me because I would know exactly what they're talking about. Now let's look at hand tools. Now the tool on the right is called an ergonomic needle nose pliers. And the tool on the left is called just a regular needle nose pliers with ergonomic handles, cushioned handles. Now both tools can be used correctly and incorrectly. The needle nose pliers on the left, which photo is the correct use? on the left picture, which is correct. Upper, that's right, correct use. Because look at that wrist, you're not breaking the wrist. Incorrect, this is incorrect use of needle nose. Now, if you're just doing one thing one time at home, whatever, this is really not a big deal. But if you're doing this on an assembly line or production line or doing it all day long, bottom left is going to cause you a problem. Now, the right tool is sold as an ergonomic tool. Which photo is the correct use of that tool? Lower, that's correct. This is correct use here because you're not breaking your wrist when you use it. And if you do that all day long using it that way, that's good. But the upper picture, this is not the correct way to use it because see, look, the person's breaking their wrist. So if they're doing they're doing the upper position, use the left tool. If they're doing a straight position, use the right tool, the tool on the right. All right. Now, hand tools, now you want a power grip, let's say with a hammer. Use a power grip. Now, I don't know if you've seen too many hammers with curved handles. That's supposed to be an advantage. I don't know if they've done studies on that, but you can buy hammers that are very different looking like the one that we show here in the picture. It has a curved handle. You want longer handles so you don't have contact force with your hand, the palm of your hand. Longer handles. Now, so we've chosen tools. If we rotate our employees, that's going to always help prevent ergonomic illnesses and injuries. And it's also going to make the job more interesting. A lot of employees don't want to do the same little task all day long. They might get bored and not pay attention at the end of the day. Work hardening is another thing. Years ago, I went to a safety conference in Chicago, and one of the car manufacturers that has a plant in Kentucky, they assemble cars, and what they did is they had boot camp, and so they had to they hired employees, and they had to go through a fitness program and become fit before they could even be allowed to work on an assembly line. So work hardening makes me think about that because they said, look, we want people that are fit. We want people that can work in awkward positions and lessen their chance of injury. So they had boot camp, and work hardening is part of that sort of thing. Now that is a best practice. Most companies don't require their employees to go through a boot camp before they can do the job. But it's just like the military. You have boot camp to prepare people physically for what they're going to do later. If the person's out of shape, if they're way overweight, and they put them in bad positions, we're just asking for problems. Now, with ergonomics, again, we don't have an ergonomic standard. So for OSHA compliance officers here in North Carolina to cite that, they have to use the general duty clause. And they have a procedure in their field operations manual for citing ergonomics. And if you want to go to our website, you can pull this up online and look at it if you'd like. But ergonomics can be cited. Now, even though there's not a standard. Now, what do you think is one of the first, what are some of the first documents that OSHA compliance officers, they're doing a programmed inspection, say a wall-to-wall inspection of your workplace, what's one of the first things they look at when they come in? Documents. That's right, Richard, 300 log, training. Those are all good answers. But they're going to look at your 300 log and see if there are any trends. And if you have a lot of back sprains and people doing the same thing and they haven't corrected anything, that's going to be a red flag maybe for ergonomics. So they may want to look at your ergonomics program if you have one. But for that general duty clause, for that citation to stick, you have to expose an employee to a hazard. It could cause death or serious physical harm. What is serious physical harm? What is a serious injury? How do you know something is a serious injury? Somebody says somebody got hurt. It's a serious injury. What would define it to be a serious injury? I see a lot of you are typing. Okay, medical attention. Okay, Merton. Merton's got what I'm looking for. Our star student requires medical treatment versus first aid. And we're talking about the treatment, not who's looking at the injury, but the treatment. If it's anything beyond first aid, that is a serious injury. So if it's an injury that requires medical treatment, where does that injury end up on? Where does it end up on? The injury. 300 log. Right, Mark. Richard. That's good. Now, the hazard must be recognized in the industry, and there must be a way to abate the hazard. But if you have those four things, a compliance officer could cite a hazard that they see in the workplace. Now, we do focus on ergonomics in North Carolina in long-term care and food manufacturing because their injury rates are higher than most other occupations except for construction and some other ones. Those are high-risk industries, but ergonomics is a big issue within those industries. And we talked earlier about somebody moving a 100-pound client or patient in a nursing home. If they lift that person the wrong way, you're going to have a back injury most likely. Now, if you go to the federal OSHA website, osha.gov, there are a lot of guidelines that you can pull up, documents you can pull up to give you more information about what you can do to improve your ergonomics program. So if you're on this list, I would go to osha.gov and see what they have to show you to see what you're doing compares to what the guidelines are from OSHA, federal OSHA. Now, if you got an ergonomics program, if your management top-down people care and they're committed to it and you have employees working on it, the people that do the regular work, and you train and you analyze the workplace and you take control measures and you have medical management and you evaluate your program every year, you're going to have a really good ergonomics program. And your injury and illness rates will be lower, which will affect your workers' compensation costs, which will save your employer a lot of money. And that's a good thing when you're saving your employer money. Now, again, when you go to federal OSHA, osha.gov, you go to the website, there are some e-tools there that get into all these different types of work. Electrical, baggage, beverage, workstations, hospitals, warehouses, nursing homes, poultry processing, printing, sewing. So if you do any of this kind of work, there's some e-tools on osha.gov for you. And on this slide, you'll see resources on our website, again on the federal site, and on NIOSH's site. Now, NIOSH does research for OSHA, and they're a division of the Center for Disease Control. So you can go to NIOSH and find a lot of good information too. And with that said, we've defined ergonomics. We looked at injuries, problems, issues, signs, symptoms, stressors, how we combat those stressors, and how we look at ergonomics in North Carolina. So with that said, looks like we are at the end of our webinar. It's 11:15. So you are welcome to log off now. And I'll be on here for questions and comments, and Samantha has one. Now I want to scroll up. Any advice on getting upper management on board, implementing a program? We do evaluations to make recommendations, tell them how much money it costs, but they see the upfront cost to avoid. All they see is the cost up front to avoid a possible injury. Samantha, um, safety is a sales job, and we know that. So um, your job is to, of course, not quit. Um, just say, look, we want to implement a program, and we want to focus on the things that are the highest risk in our workplace of ergonomic injuries and illnesses. We know that there is an upfront cost, but this ergonomic study is going to study the process. And you had a webinar done by Tom Wilder, who used to work at a company, and they did these studies. And every time they did these studies, they saved money. A lot of times we learn how to do the task with less people, lower the distances that products and materials are moved. So we became more efficient, and we saved money and lowered risk. So if you have a study going on from an ergonomics team and they're focusing on the biggest issues, it can save you money. You might need to do some research, but don't just look at the cost up front. I have examples that we used to work on in pharmaceutical manufacturing. Every time we put a team on an issue, we save money because we studied the process. It's industrial engineering. So keep plugging away at it. See if you can find some studies similar to yours. Make sure that you have logic as far as what you're going to have the ergonomics team work on. And you can have your safety committee do this. So you don't even necessarily have to have another committee. But if you lower risk out there, employees see that you're lowering risk and studying everything, their morale is going to go up and hopefully you'll improve the workplace. So good luck, Samantha. And if you want to call me later, call me and we can talk some more. Blake, Michael, Mark, you're welcome. Herb, David, Muriel, Ray, Avonda, Sky, Brian, Richard, Jen, Lori, Spencer, you're welcome. Lynn, Samantha. Yeah, do some research, Samantha. And we also have consultative services that are free. You can call our consultative services people as well. Elizabeth, Will, you're welcome. So again, we had one question or comment. You were all a great class today. And I don't know that I have any other questions right now. So right now, okay, consultative, we're visiting you on the 19th. Great. Use our consultative people. I mean, they're free. All they ask you to do is if they find something, you just work with them to improve it and reduce the hazards in your workplace. So right now it's about 11:18, so I'm going to go ahead and close the webinar. You've all been great today, and thank you for attending. This is Tom Wilder with the North Carolina Department of Labor, and we'll see you in the next webinar, which may be tomorrow. You're welcome, Michael.